Hey, welcome to our study called Cutting the Covenant. Today we're looking at Genesis chapter 15. So far in the story of Abram, we've learned several things about the man. He was a normal guy, living in Mesopotamia with his family who were idol worshippers. One day, God called Abram to leave his home and to travel to the land of Canaan. God promised to make a name and a huge family for Abram. The problem was that Abram had a barren wife, and he'd left behind his land, so none of these promises had come true yet. Famine struck Canaan, and so Abram chose to sojourn in the land of Egypt, where he promptly lost his wife. So God intervened and gave Abram back his wife, and actually gave him more material possessions than when he went into Egypt with. So God blessed him. Now, sometime after that, a group of kings invaded the land and carried off Abram's nephew Lot as a spoil of war. Abram took all his fighting men in his household, and he went up to north of Damascus there, and brought Lot back to Canaan, and Lot then returned back to his home, which was now in Sodom. And even in the story of rescue and victory, Abram doesn't take any credit for it. He could. He just did something that the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other kings, they couldn't do. But he doesn't. Instead, he worships God. He gives a tenth of all the spoils to the priest, to the king, Melchizedek, as a tithe, for worship. And so that's what he does. He listens to what Melchizedek has to say about how God has blessed him, how God has given the victory. He agrees, gives him the tenth, worships God. So as we start chapter 15 of Genesis, we find a verbal break here. In the text, there's a break. It says, after these things. That signals that there's some time has passed. We don't know how much time, but there's some time that has gone on since 14 now into 15. And remember, that was Abraham's military victory was in 14, and now we get to 15. And what's going on here? What's happening here? Well, Abram experienced that great spiritual and emotional mountaintop experience, right? He's up there, he's following God, he goes out, fights physically, defeats the enemy, brings back Lot, and he worships God, and that's at the top. But now we're going to see Abram heading back down into the valley. Reality is setting in again. Sometimes you have those experiences. A lot of times when people go on retreats or camps or something like that, they talk about how they had this great experience with God, and then they go back home, and then, nothing's going on. And a lot of people have that, or they go to church, and then it's great, this is amazing. Or they're going to one church for a while, and it's all great and amazing. They have all these experiences. And then all of a sudden, it kind of gets normal. And people are like, well, I'm going to just move on and stuff like that. But this is where Abram's at, and we need to see what he's going on here. What is he doing? And this count here, and a lot of the other parts of Abram's story, really lends to the historicity of this account. Because if you were trying to paint a hero of the faith, or where did the idea of faith and righteousness come from, you would try. I think most people would try to paint it as a rosy picture. Like, this guy is awesome. He does everything right, but he never struggles with anything. But here we see with Abram, that's not the case. So Abram's a real guy. He's a real man struggling with doubts and with unbelief and things like that. So, sometimes we have great moments in life, and other times our shortcomings come out. And so we see that with Abram in the stories that Moses chose to write about here. But in this study, we return to a common theme among the heroes of the faith. And that common theme is fear. Fear is something that almost all people struggle with. Sometimes fear is rational, but oftentimes it's not. And, in the study, I looked up how many phobias there are, just because I wanted to know. And I thought it'd be kind of interesting to see, how many phobias are there out there. And it's really hard to come up with a definitive answer, because there's so many, and there's so much variety. There's categories they put them in, but it seems like humans are really fearful of almost anything. I mean, anything that's in the universe, somebody's afraid of it. So why do we fear? And why is it that when God speaks in the Old Testament or Jesus in the New Testament, many times, oftentimes, the first phrase is, fear not? Well, we're going to look at Abram here and see if we can't find answers to those questions. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find a cure for our fears here. And then the second thing we need to do in this study is that we have in this chapter contained verses that confirm and show God confirming the covenant of God with his people, with Abram, with his descendants. So we have this confirmation here again to us as people of God, to Abram, to Moses and the Israelites, that God is a covenant God. He makes promises. He makes covenants. He makes these established agreements here. And so we see that again here in this chapter. Now we could spend weeks and weeks and weeks. You can spend a lot of time studying just this passage because it shows up in a lot of the New Testament. I mean, Paul loves this section because he uses it in Romans, Galatians. The writer of Hebrews uses it as an argument for what they're talking about. So it shows up in at least those three. I mean, really, the whole gospel is based on the fact that Abram was there and that he believed in God and that God made that covenant with Abram. So really everything after this springboards off of these covenants that God makes, really the one covenant that God establishes over and over again with Abram. So it's a very important section. Abram's a pivotal character in the Bible, and so we need to get a hold of this. And so you can spend weeks and weeks and weeks studying on this, years. People have written books and books and books on it, so it's definitely something you can dive in further. We're just going to scratch the surface in this study, though. So this study kind of really breaks down into two sections. So you have the first section is in verses 1 through 6, where we find Abram is seeking assurance of an heir. He wants to know, God's promised an heir. Well, can I have assurance of that? And then the second section is found in 7 through 20, where he seeks assurance for the land. God has promised the land to him. Where's the assurance of that? He needs some reassurance. He needs something here to hang his hat on to be assured that this is going to happen, because nothing's happened yet. And he wants that assurance. So that's what we're going to be looking at in this study. So come back next time and we'll begin to look at how Abram sought for assurance of an heir.